Well, welcome to Money in the Constitution. This is the sixth lecture in the Constitution seminar series. And today's kind of a wild ride. Talk about money. I'll be the first to admit that I don't understand everything about money. It's a very complex system. But I also be the first to say that I really think and I really sincerely hold that the Constitution is very, very clear on some very basic principles that would make our money system very simple. If we did what the Constitution asked us, we'd really be able to have a monetary system that is based on true principles of freedom. So I wanted to start out, I like to start with this slide because a lot of times we hear the word million and billion and trillion, and really we have no idea what that means. All we know is it means a bunch of zeros, right? Tons of money. Let's look at an example. This is this is probably about 2 years old. This information you'll notice right away because the money is not as big as it is these days in 2013. U.S. tax revenue, $2.17 trillion, okay? That's what $2.17 trillion looks like. The federal budget is $3.8 trillion. You should notice right away there's a problem. We spend 3.8, we take in 2.17, okay? There's a little bit of a deficit there, isn't there? So the new debt every year is $1.65 trillion, and of course those numbers have grown. This information is about 2 years old, like I said, okay? So $1.65 trillion in new debt. Now that's what is called a deficit. Sometimes people don't understand the terms. A deficit is a yearly measurement, okay? We spend 3.8, we take in 2.17, therefore we have a yearly new debt deficit of $1.65 trillion. Now the national debt, here's where you can tell right away this is old information because we're already past 17 trillion, okay? But a couple years ago we were at 15 trillion. $15 trillion in national debt, and that's a cumulative number. National debt gets added to every year. Okay, it's a grand total number. Unfunded liabilities. What are unfunded liabilities? What's a liability? Is it something good or bad? Liability is bad. And unfunded, that's a bad, okay? You have no idea how you're going to pay for this thing that you owe. Unfunded liabilities, at least 114 trillion. That number, just depending on which generally accepted accounting practice you use, right? It could be way more than 114 trillion, but at least 114 trillion dollars of unfunded liabilities. The great majority of this is from our Social Security and from Medicare, okay? Now the recent budget cuts, sometimes we get on the legislator's case and say, come on guys, for heaven's sakes, take a real chunk out of this, really cut back somewhere. And they say, okay, well we're going to get serious. We're going to take out $38.5 billion, okay? That's a lot of money that they cut back. Now, in order to understand what all these numbers mean, because like I said, billions, trillions, it just kind of goes off into nowhere, into oblivion. Let's look at this as if it were a household budget. What I've done is I've taken off 8 zeros in order to give us a perspective of what we're talking about here. My annual family income, let's say, is $21,700, okay? So you can see how, what essentially what I've done is taken off the 8 zeros. Is it 2.17 trillion? Well, now it's only 21,700. Just take off those 8 zeros and you have a new number. The annual family budget then is $38,200, okay? I'm spending $38,000 and I'm only taking in roughly $22,000. Okay, you see how I did that? The comparison there, the upper numbers there, just taking off those eight zeros. So the new debt on my credit card each year as a family, because I have no other way to pay for it, is $16,500. Wait, I'm making $22,000 and I'm putting on my credit card an additional $16,000? I'm spending $38,000, so I have no other choice but to put $16,000 every year on my credit card? Is that out of control? It's completely out of control, isn't it? Now, not to worry, my outstanding balance on my credit card is $150,000, and I'm adding $16,000 every year to that. Okay? This is the story of my family household budget, but really what's the story of? It's the story of the U.S. government. And you can see how upside down we are monetarily. Now, future obligations, these unfunded liabilities, right? I have 7 kids. They're going to have some awesome weddings and etc. I have to pay for college. I know that I'm on the hook for $1.14 million. I owe that somehow in the future. I'm going to pay for that somehow in the future, in the next 10 to 15 years. Okay? This looks like a very rosy picture for my budget, my family budget. No, it doesn't even come close to being logical, does it? So my wife and I sit down and say, we're going to be serious. We are going to cut back. We need to cut back. Okay? We say, you know what, we're going to cut back $385. That's right, $385. That's it. And we're supposed to be praised for being serious about cutting our budget, right? Really? You're going to cut $385 when you owe that much money on your credit card and have future obligations? So you can see how it's really comical how much the Congress cut back. And the little asterisk next to that is the idea that they really didn't cut back at all. All they did was reduce future increases by $385 billion, or $38.5 billion. All they did is decrease future increases. So they still increase, just not as much. And we're supposed to praise them for being serious about cutting back on the budget, okay? So anyway, this slide to me helps clarify what kind of situation we're in. We're in a hole. We're upside down, okay? So monetarily, we have some things to look at. I like this quote by George Washington. This contextually here, this is after they'd won the war for independence, okay? And he said, this is after that. So you're thinking, well, gosh, once they've won the war for independence, things should be peachy, right? This should be rosy. But here's the quote that Washington offers. He says, if any person had told me that there would have been such a formidable rebellion as exists, I would have thought him fit for a madhouse. What's going on here? 1787, we already won the war for independence 4 years ago. Things should be good, right? If someone had told me what a formidable rebellion existed, I'd have said, you're nuts. No, we just won the war, remember? Things are good. And yet they weren't, were they? Things were crazy. Europe was waiting. The European nation was waiting for us to fall apart again. A lot of them didn't even leave our continent. They had their own forts still in our land waiting to take over Britain and France. One of the telling stories is our continental dollar. Okay, we printed the continental dollar to pay for our war debts, to pay our soldiers, to pay supplies, etc. The continental dollar, when it came out, was worth $1, right? And by the end of just a few years, it was only worth 2 pennies. Okay? It had been inflated so much that it was only worth 2 pennies at that point. There were some huge problems. The states were fighting. Some citizens were killing each other. There was all kinds of chaos. There was a literal rebellion on their hands. Okay? And the monetary situation was one of the biggest things. Because money-wise, this continental dollar was only worth 2 pennies. It's supposed to be worth $1. It was worthless, essentially. Okay? Let's look at another quote by George Washington. And this quote was in 1791. Okay? In 1791, what had happened between 1787 when he said his previous quote and then 4 years later? What had happened is the Constitution. Okay? Here's what he said: tranquility reigns. As opposed to 4 years ago. Tranquility reigns. Our public credit stands on the high ground which 3 years ago would have been considered a species of madness to have foretold. Okay? What happened? Like I said before, what happened is the Constitution. Were they in dire straits? Did they have some major monetary problems? They did. And what did they do? They implemented true principles of freedom in the Constitution, and the result was tranquility reigning and public credit standing on high moral ground where they could get their country in order again. Now, some people say, we're beyond hope. Our monetary system is gone. And I would say, why don't we look to what the founders did? What George Washington proclaimed was, look, go to the Constitution, apply those principles, and we can save our monetary system. So we're going to spend our time today looking at the principles of the Constitution in regards to money. And really, it's a beautiful thing. I hope you get excited about it as I do. So let's start out with some definitions like we always do. What's money? Money is any article or substance used as a medium of exchange, a measure of wealth, or means of payment. That's what money is. Okay? It's important to understand that government didn't create money. Money was a natural phenomenon that happened between people. Okay? I want what you have. I don't have what you want. So what if I give you this thing that you can use with someone else to get what you want? That thing's called money. That wasn't created by government. It was created by naturally thinking and acting human beings. Okay? What are some characteristics that money should have? Well, first of all, money should have some type of intrinsic worth. Okay? If you choose something like trash to be your money, it's not going to last very long because no one even wants it in the first place. It should have some type of intrinsic worth to it. Okay? It should also be divisible. Because in the marketplace of goods and services, buying and selling, trading, if your money, the very smallest common denominator of it is some huge chunk, and you can't divide it, how do you participate in the smaller commercial transactions? It has to be divisible. You have to be able to divide it into smaller and smaller increments. Okay? Thirdly, your money should be portable. If you have to hook up your trailer and load up this huge piece of money to take it into market every day and to use in your commercial transactions, that's not going to work very well. It should be something that's portable, easy to be carried. It should be durable, because if you drop your money on the ground and it shatters, or if you sit on it wrong and it whatever, that's not going to be very good money because it's not durable. It's not going to last. Or if it oxidizes, or if it gets wet and it erodes, That doesn't work very well. You need to have money that lasts, okay, that's durable. Lastly, it should be relatively scarce, because if you choose money to be like sand, and so, oh, well, here's my money. It's so plentiful. It's not scarce at all. It's so plentiful that it has no value because it's just commonly found everywhere. If it's not scarce, it's not going to have any value, okay? So those are 5 attributes of what money should be. And people use different types of money throughout the history of the world. They've used fish, things that are edible. Tell me about fish's durability. The first day, it's an asset, right? After the end of the first day, it becomes a liability. Nobody even wants it anymore. You can't use it as money. So its durability is not very good. So fish didn't last too long. It's nice for a simple economy, but it doesn't have any durability, okay? What about shells? Durability again, right? You sit on those things, they break. What about the uniformity? You have this little conch shell that's a little bit bigger than the other conch shell. Well, how much is it worth? Well, it depends. It gets very complex, doesn't it? There's not some uniformity there. What about cows? Tell me about their portability. How portable are cows to be used as money? They've been used as money in the past. They're not that portable, are they? They're fairly inconvenient to use. What about their divisibility? What if I want to trade some of my cow for your chickens? I'm going to have to lop off and kill my money in order to get some of your chickens. And you're not going to want my money anymore because it's a killed cow, right? So there's some issues there as well. So what throughout history has been most commonly used as money? It's always been gold and silver. Why is that? Because gold and silver has won out in the free market of ideas. It is the most durable, portable, divisible, relatively scarce, intrinsic worth substance that there is. It wins. Not because government edict, not because they said it shall be, but because people said this is what works the best. This is what is the most qualifying for the terms of what we want money to be. Another interesting thing about money or about gold and silver and why it's good money is 3 other elements. The first one is it's homogeneous, right? You have an ounce of a diamond. Is it necessarily the same value as another ounce of diamond? No, it depends on its cut and clarity and all that stuff, right? When you buy an engagement ring, they try to tell you about the 4 C's, okay? The other thing is it's used and valued in every culture throughout the world for religious purposes, construction purposes, etc., decorative purposes. It's universally accepted. And thirdly, it has a high value to weight ratio, okay? What little piece of gold is worth a lot. It's not that there's not enough coal that it has the same value as gold, but you'd have to have the whole room full of coal to equal one little tiny speck of gold, right? So it's a high value to weight ratio. Now, in our modern enlightened age, we've rejected some basic ideas about the value of money, and now we have 3 different types of money. The first type of money is commodity money. That's the one we just talked about. Commodity, what do you think about when I say commodity? Wheat, grains, those types of things. Commodity actually has value itself. Gold and silver coin has value itself, okay? Second type of money is this money called fiduciary. Notice the little yellow stamp on this piece of money. Fiduciary, what's that mean? It means trust, okay? The piece of paper has no value except for the fact that you can trust that you can turn it in for gold and silver, the real money, the commodity money, okay? And we've taken it one step further and said, oh, our last type of money is fiat money. What's fiat mean? Fiat means edict. Mandate. It's worth that because the government says it's worth that, and that's it. There's nothing backing it up. It's simply the full faith and credit of the United States government. They say it is, therefore it is. Okay, that's fiat money. Now, let's make a little comparison here. We got a monopoly money, and we've got the fiat money. Our current fiat money is called a Federal Reserve note, okay? People call it a dollar, but its real name is a Federal Reserve note. When you look at it, it even says that, Federal Reserve note at the top. $1, but it's really a Federal Reserve note. Now, how are they any different? How is this $100 bill different than the $100 Monopoly bill? Well, it's got higher quality paper, higher quality ink, we hope. But when you're playing Monopoly and you have this yellow $100 bill, what can you do with that? Can you buy houses? Can you buy properties? Can you buy hotels? Yeah. Right? And no one can say you can't. So yeah, I can. According to the rules of the game, I can use my money to buy whatever I want to buy. Okay? When the game's over, though, can you take your $100 yellow Monopoly bill and go across the street and buy some tools with it? No. Why? Because the game's over. You're not playing Monopoly anymore. As long as we're playing the games of the Federal Reserve, then the Federal Reserve note works. But what happens in the game of the Federal Reserve note is over. It's just a piece of paper. Now, Voltaire, who's a socialist, I don't like to quote him very often, but Voltaire said, paper money will always return to its intrinsic value, which is paper. Zero, nothing. It's just paper. Okay? And that's what happened. Paper money is just paper. Okay? And that's an important point to understand. One other thing, I've done this presentation quite a few times, and it dawned on me one day, wait, there's another way this is monopoly money. How is it monopoly money? Because the federal government has given the power, the monopoly power, over legal tender to the Federal Reserve Note. The Federal Reserve Note is the only legal tender. It has monopoly over legal tender status in the United States. That's another way it's monopoly money, because they have that monopoly over the market. Okay? Okay, so what is a dollar? I've got an object lesson for you here. I've got a $20 bill. Okay, it's actually a $20 Federal Reserve Note. We call it a $20 bill. If I were to take your $20 bill and say, hey, I'll give you $1 for your 20, would anyone take me up on that? No? Why would I do that? And what if I clear my throat and say, no, sorry, you didn't understand. What I'm going to do, I'll give you $1 for your 20. Who would take me up on it then? Anybody would, right? Yeah, give me your dollar. Oh, wait a second. Why when I said I'll give you $1 for 20, did you say no? And then I say, well, no, if I give you $1 for 20, you say yes. So what's a dollar? I'm confused. This $20 bill, remember, it's not a $20 bill, it's a $20 Federal Reserve Note. And this dollar, it actually has what in it? It's actually commodity money. It has silver in it. That's why people say, yes, I want this, even though it's only one of these and 20 of these. Okay? Let's look at that a little bit more closely to understand that. So what's a dollar? Okay, this little coin you see here, this is interesting. It's called a Spanish piece of 8. Okay? The dollar that was in circulation at that time was called the Spanish milled dollar. It was also called the Spanish piece of 8, or it was also called a column dollar. Okay? The reason it's called the Spanish piece of 8 because it was scored on the back. You could pop it in half, you could pop it in quarters, and you could pop it in eighths. And each eighth was called a bit. Anyone heard 8 bits a dollar? Okay? 2 bits a quarter? That's where it comes from. Now another little thing about this is called a column dollar. Like I said, it's because these little columns you see on it. Okay? Now these columns are surrounded by an S-shaped little ribbon. So as I click here and we work through what this looks like, what is that? That's the dollar sign, isn't it? That's where dollar sign came from, was from the Spanish milled dollar. Okay? So what is this thing we call a dollar? The dollar is actually mentioned twice in the Constitution, once in Article 1, Section 9, Clause 1, and once in the 7th Amendment. Okay? But the founders never defined what a dollar was. They just simply said the word dollar. So, historically, Jefferson had an archenemy. His name was Hamilton. They were both on opposite sides of a lot of different issues. But in this definition, in this idea, they needed to come up with a definition of what the dollar was. They're on the same page. Okay, what they did is they went into the market and found out this Spanish milled dollar that was being circulated. We need to do a scientific experiment, find out how much silver is in it. Okay? So they simply took a market analysis. They didn't politicize it. They didn't campaign. They simply took a market analysis, found that some had been rubbed thin and some had been rubbed off the edge. And out of their sample, they found that there was, on average, 371.25 grains of fine, showy silver in each dollar. And so, under the Mint Act of 1792, one of the very first acts of the very first Congress, they defined a dollar to be 371.25 grains of fine, showy silver. That is the definition of what a dollar is, okay? It's a mass. It's a definition. It's a scientific number. It's not a politicized or governmentally manipulated idea. The dollar is simply a measurement of content of silver in the coin, okay? It's interesting. It's important to understand that. That's the basis behind the whole monetary system, is that it can't be changed by government. It's simply defined, and then the people themselves are the ones who decide on what that thing is worth, what the value of the dollar is. Will it buy me a chicken? Will it buy me? That just depends on the market. Okay? Now let's get the